A lot of it had to do with the community getting complacent about gang activity. We haven't been talking about it much in the last couple of years. We've been very successful. And I think some community leaders and community members said, well, we've been successful, the gangs are gone, and people just stopped paying attention to them. They didn't ask for education programs that we had. They just didn't pay attention, and what happened is allowed the gangs to kind of come back in strength, and kind of started off with just a little bit of flicker of a match, and it kind of exploded. When one gang member gets shot, then there's got to be retaliation for it, and it just kind of got widespread this summer.
Especially in our smaller communities, we see a lot of what's called cliques, or these smaller sets, neighborhood gangs, if you will, that kind of claim the name of that neighborhood or maybe even a street. They still follow the same trends as far as some of these national gangs with the culture and the type of indoctrinations and some of the rules and regulations that they hold as part of their sets. But they're some of the most dangerous ones because they know that they're smaller and they're trying to make a name for themselves. And these are some of the areas that we deal with on a local basis.
Well, local law enforcement reporting information, we found that sometimes with the out-of-state traffic, they're involving gangs, a lot of times are coming from those metropolitan areas. So we determined that we'll reach out to those areas and say, hey, look, we want to share our information on known gang members who may go to that area as well, travel up north, if you'll share it with us. And so through those agreements, we've been able to do that, and we'd like to expand that if we could.
Okay.
But again, it's driven by what's reported to us. As far as we're going to grab information, like Los Angeles might not be it's not a big conduit for activity coming to us. We have Interstate 95 and 20 and 26, so we look at those avenues, how they come through our state and stay at our state.
Well, almost universally with the FBI, every case we work is with our local partners. We have a violent crime task force here that's one of the most successful in the country, but most of our cases are going to revolve guns and drugs. That's where a lot of federal violations get in, so they're almost 100% of our cases will involve both.
And what kind of guns do you find?
Typically, handguns are the most prominent. We do find long guns, semi-automatic, and sometimes, depending on even with some of the motorcycle type group gangs, we'll see full automatic weapons being used.
And what about drugs? What do you find, and where do they come from?
We see a lot of marijuana, we see a lot of crack cocaine, and then and we're starting to see a huge influence of methamphetamines now, especially again involving some of the motorcycle gangs that we've worked and things. It seems like methamphetamine seems to be the drug of choice there.
You tend to, in various parts of the country, obviously by the demographic makeups when it comes racially, based on the community, they generally reflect the community as a whole. Gangs tend to be disproportionately concentrated and in these large numbers in your large urban populations. Age range, they tend to be between the ages of 12 and 24. If you look at law enforcement data, they generally going to have their median age more like in the 18-year-old roughly period, because they are usually waiting until someone's getting arrested and contacted. If you look at self-reported data from students, which tend to be done on high school levels, you'll find average age maybe more at the 15-year-old age. Both give us a picture, it's just where you're getting the data from. So, but basically in that teenage range, and then that's your peak periods, going into the early 20s maybe. As for gender dynamics, even though you've seen a growth in female-involved gangs, it's still disproportionate in males' game. Yeah, we see more numbers when you look at some of the research data, survey data. There's more females' involvement than, say, maybe 20 years ago, but it's still predominantly a male game.
Well, when you look at the definition of a gang, it's 3 or more people involved in criminal activity. They're not as always easy to identify because they're not always wearing the same type of clothing or signage or jewelry. You want to look at the behavior, and if you see the behavior that looks to be organized and looks like it's a group, call the police and let us know what's going on so that we can also investigate it. The community interaction is probably the most crucial part of being successful against the gangs in our communities now.
Well, the fact that we're talking about it now, it's going to be back on the forefront. We brought it to the media's attention, we brought it to the community's attention that we need to go back to what made us successful in the beginning, and that's working together as a team. Enforcement's not the answer. It's got to be enforcement and education. The enforcement's been there. Now we've got to get back and strengthen the education part that we had previously that proved to be very successful. And once we do that, we can get back on the path we had, but we've got to stay on that path. We can't just stop and say, hey, we're successful, and say, pat each other on the back and say we don't have to worry about it anymore. When you do that, it's going to come right back like it did this past summer.